Hi, Scott Orlin with Cinema-Magazine. In our continuing episodes of Cinema Out of the Box, we're bringing you something very early in the creative stages. There is going to be a new musical coming down the pipeline, and right now it's a concept album, which we're going to talk about, and it is based on the 1968 George Romero film called Night of the Living Dead. And the man responsible for it, basically he is the entire creative team, Jordan Wolfe. Jordan, what was it specifically about that story that you felt it lent itself to be turned into a musical?
Wow. Well, I've always been a huge fan of, well, I come from theater, I'm a musical theater guy. I'm an actor, singer. And so I've always loved horror movies and the cross section of horror movies and musicals. I've always loved Little Shop of Horrors and Bat Boy and, Toxic Avenger. When I sat down to write a musical, I thought that's the angle that I, have something to add to, I think. And Night of the Living Dead, I mean, it's a very special movie to me. It's the first of so many things. It was the first indie movie that really had major box office. I'm shocked. That really had major box office success. It came out around the same time as Rosemary's Baby, and really blew a lot of its other movies out of the water. It took on a lot of social meaning because it was the first horror movie to star an African American actor, and it was one of the first movies ever to star an African American actor where the plot didn't involve race. It was very ahead of its time, and if you watch it today, I mean, it really holds up. It's filmed in a very kind of almost beautiful way, and the having no resources and no money and no anything kind of forced George Romero to be creative. And then it was also kind of the first modern zombie movie. He kind of created this idea that zombies are, normal people, everyday people, could look like any of us, and are resurrected from the dead. That was kind of his take on it. So all of that just really sang to me.
I know, sadly, George Romero passed, I think, in 2017. Did you ever have a conversation with him about this?
No, I started working on the show very soon before he passed away, and I wrote it pretty quickly over the summer of, I think, 2018. So yeah, I never had that chance. I have spoken to people since who knew him, who worked with him. When so Night of the Living Dead ran off Broadway last year, had a great premiere run in New York, and it was great having, there were the musical theater fans who were like, had maybe seen the movie, didn't really know much about it, who really enjoyed it, and there were the serious horror people who came out, and George Romero fan club and people like that. So it was really cool to kind of get both of those perspectives. But there were people who worked with him and who knew him who talked about him, and by all accounts, he was just the coolest guy. Had a great sense of humor about himself, never took himself too seriously, and he actually started, I mean, my favorite kind of little fact about him is that he started with Mr. Rogers. They were both from Pittsburgh, and he said some of those puppet scenes were the scariest movies he ever shot. But he said, I don't want to tell Mr. Rogers, about Night of the Living Dead. This is probably not up his alley. This isn't his thing. At the time, it was, I mean, people were really running out of the theater terrified of this thing. And he found out later that Mr. Rogers actually went to a midnight showing of the movie, and because he just wanted to support, what he was doing and what his, one of his guys was doing. But yeah, so I would have loved to have met him, but a few people have said he would have loved that a musical was being done. That was very much like, he was just a very cool guy, apparently, and a genius in his own, in his own little area too.
As I mentioned in my introduction, which I think, if memory serves me correctly, Jesus Christ Superstar started out the same way as a concept album and then eventually segued into the theater. How advantageous creatively was that?
Well, they kind of happened at the same time for me. So we, some of the actors from the off-Broadway production were part of the album, and some not. The album ended up coming out kind of during or after the off-Broadway production, but we definitely were working on the recordings before we had a show, and it was an interesting thing. You kind of get the music really nailed down, and then you go, well, how are all these other pieces gonna fit into it? You know, so it's a great thing. I mean, the more you can kind of workshop all the pieces of a show before they all come together, you know, I think it is like Jesus Christ Superstar was that way, and it kind of yeah, it was a fun way to do it, because then when we got into putting the rest of the show together and putting it up on stage, we kind of really had a clear idea of what it was going to sound like.
What's really fascinating is listening to the score. It's a pastiche. I mean, I'm just trying to sit and go over some of my notes. Like, this ain't my first rodeo, very country. The Juice, a very Latin flavor. Doctor's Orders, a little doo-wop. News broadcast, kind of a 1940s swing type of feel in the introduction. Night of the Living Dead, that song, obviously pure rock.
Yeah.
What is there a specific meaning of the musical choices? I mean, are they representative of the characters? Or are you trying to just kind of nod your head to certain musical motifs?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I mean, you know, I knew that I wanted to keep the show set in the '60s. You know, that was a very big thing for me for a lot of reasons, but it kind of helps the visual, the fun of it. I mean, one of the things I very much want is the original movie is very bleak, it's very gray, and it intentionally it's very kind of hopeless. And I wanted the musical to be exactly the opposite. It's bright colors. You know, everyone's got, you know, lots of crazy '60s clothes, and it's like horror meets What's New Pussycat, and that was very much kind of what I wanted it to be. And so the music kind of reflects that, but I also didn't want it to be locked in, you know, to all having to sound '60s. You know, so I think there are certain styles of music that follow the different characters, and then I also just kind of wanted to keep it fresh. You know, there's kind of an unpredictability. What's you know, what's there going to be next? What haven't I heard yet? Oh, okay. There's a 40s jump swing number. Okay, there's a lot, and I kind of liked the eclecticness of it. That kind of, you know, adds to the fun. If it were a serious, you know, if it was our drama version of Night of the Living Dead, then all the music would probably have to be more kind of the same thing. But you know, because it's a comedy, and because it has kind of an off the wall kind of feeling, you have the freedom to play around with the music a lot more, which was really exciting for me.
And a last question for you. Obviously, anybody who's a fan of the genre, part of the allure for them is not only the intensity, the frights, but it's the gore. I mean, they like to see part of the kills and going that. How interesting is it to present that on stage? Because in a film, when you're doing it, you can spend hours in makeup and you can kind of reshoot it and do it in a myriad of different ways. But on stage, it has to be live in the moment.
Exactly. Well, you know, there are two ways of doing this show, and you know, it's been done regionally since, and it's been interesting to see the different interpretations. But you know, we went, you know, for a few reasons, we went with almost no gore. You know, we didn't have a splash section, we didn't have any of that, and all of that came from. You know, a lot of it was the lighting, and a lot of it was just the performances. It was very old school in that way, and very kind of low tech. And we kind of liked that it felt like, you know, it was low tech on purpose, and a lot of it came from just the expressions and the way of kind of acting it out. And that was really a fun thing, because what happened was, after the show, people would come up to me going, oh, and it was kind of bloody and gory. And I would think, well, there wasn't actually very much, there was a little, but there really wasn't much fake blood. But we kind of gave the impression, there's a lot of things you can do on stage to kind of give the impression that things are more that way. And then, you know, down the road, I'm you know, excited to see if someone decides to go the other way with the show and make it totally, you know, splash zone, gallons and gallons of blood every night. I mean, that's a really fun kind of way to do it too. So that's another fun thing about the show. You can kind of, you know, kind of go a few ways with it.
Well, I congratulate you. I can't wait to see it. Just
Oh,
curious, as this is for my German magazine, are there any plans to take this to Europe and to do various different
oh,
international versions?
I would absolutely love that, especially, Germany has such a fantastic background with musicals, and especially, you can afford to go a lot darker in German musicals. They did, when Disney did Hunchback in Germany, they had to really change it for the American audience and kind of clean it up a lot more. So no, I would love to take this to Europe and to Germany, where there's possibility of bringing it to England. So we'll see. Stay tuned. Yeah.
Night of the Living Dead, Jordan Wolfe. I really appreciate you taking the time. This
Thank
is
you so
Scott
much.
Orlin. Till next time.